Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. With Dave Minuk, with Ezra Ginsburg, I am your host, Drew Mindell. We're with you for the next couple of hours talking everything about the Winnipeg Jets. We'll touch on the Stanley Cup final now that we know it is the unexpected matchup of the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Cinderella Montreal Canadiens. But tons of Jets talk for you on this Saturday morning. We're also going to be joined throughout the show by Dennis Beyak, TSN's voice of the Winnipeg Jets. You know him as the Jets TV broadcaster. And again, also be joined in the second hour by TSN Director of Scouting, Craig Button, to talk about the upcoming NHL Draft. Gentlemen, good to see you on this Saturday morning, the last show in the month of June, the 26th of June. Dave Minuk repping the Detroit Tigers hat, which is impressive, even though they're one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball.
I didn't, my affiliation for hats, Drew. It doesn't matter what how the team is doing. I just would like.
It's a great logo, though.
It is a good logo. It's a solid logo. A lot of history.
Apparently, a great park as well. We were going to try to go to that park.
Comerica?
We were going to try to go to that one after one of the drafts. It didn't quite work out. It's funny though. Right before you came on air, Dave was saying he was going to rock the Dodgers hat. So when we started the show, I was expecting that Dodgers hat. But the Tigers one's a good one too. Makes me think of Eminem.
Comerica, good park. I once on my birthday there. I once saw a guy streaking across the field, and let me tell you, I actually saw the video somewhere, but it was hilarious. And then he was a big boy, but he got taken down by security. Actually, I think it was the most memorable part of both the game.
Is this
it wasn't you though, right? Just to be clear, it wasn't you.
It was no, it was not me.
Okay.
Although I was right behind the pitching, where the pitchers pitch or warm up, I should say, in Detroit. So. The left field bleachers, and we had a pretty good view. We were right first, second row.
Well, speaking of fans gone wild, did you see in the middle of the third period in yesterday's game between the Isles and Game 7, the action on the ice is going on, and meanwhile, as the camera is following the action, you can see that there's a brawl in the crowd. I mean, those people paid a lot of money. Like usually, you don't necessarily see the brawl happen in row 5 of the lower bowl at ice level, but they were throwing lefts and rights as a pretty good brawl that was going on in the middle of a 1-0 Game 7. God bless America, I think is what I say to that.
It's unbelievable. Phil Esposito and Brian Engblom can really still throw them, right, boys? So it's nice to see that those guys, still have a little fight left in the tank. But I didn't see that, Drew. I was watching the game live, but obviously I missed that. I must have been, going to the fridge for some some snacks or something. I don't know.
Undoubtedly, you were looking to bulk up with some late night rations. It was a great fight. It was entertaining. The game was going on. People were trying to watch the fight at the same time. It was a bit of a gong show, but in any event, the Tampa Bay Lightning win in Game 7. We'll talk about that later on in the program. We start with the big news of the week from the Winnipeg Jets, from the True North perspective, the Manitoba Moose perspective, of course, and that is the shocking announcement earlier this week. This one came out of left field. There was no inkling that this was on the horizon. Pascal Vincent leaving the Manitoba Moose as their head coach, heading to Columbus. The ties between Columbus and Winnipeg continue. Heading to Columbus to be the assistant coach for the Blue Jackets under their new head coach, Brad Larson. This one is a surprise to all of us, no doubt. Dave, you know Pascal the best out of the three of us. This is, to me, the most surprising because previously he'd been on record as saying his next move wasn't going to be back in the NHL as an assistant coach. It was going to be back in the NHL in his hopes as a head coach. So this one's certainly coming out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Drew. And I think Aaron Portzline of The Athletic in Columbus reported that Pascal interviewed for the head coaching position there in Columbus with the Blue Jackets. Obviously, they liked what they saw, not enough to give him the head coaching responsibilities, but to bring him in, I think, as an associate coach for their organization. And look, he's been with the Manitoba Moose for 5 years after leaving, the Jets to take over the role that was vacated by Keith McCambridge. And I think sometimes when you're not in the NHL, you get a little bit forgotten, and there's vacancies that open up periodically, but maybe he saw this as a stepping stone, a more likely stepping stone to a role in the NHL. I mean, look, at the end of the day, Pascal talks about what the AHL is, right? It's about development, but it's not just for players' development; it's for coaches' development. And so I wonder if he felt that he had hit his saturation point for what he had learned as a coach, and was ready for that next level of responsibility. Because if you do a good job in Columbus, it was a 3-year deal he signed with the Blue Jackets. If he does a good job on, like, coaches aren't looking at things in short term; they're looking at what their long-term prospects are. So he's thinking to himself, in 3 years, yeah, that's true too. But in 3 years, if he's done a good job with Columbus with whatever his responsibilities are, and there's some reports that it'll be a power play and working with that. But if that's the case and he's done a good job, that puts him maybe in a better place to move to that next level of responsibility, which would be as a head coach.
Well, let me stop you right there. And Ezzy, is this a promotion or is this a lateral move? Because Pascal Vincent's name had been bandied about many times before as a possible NHL head coach. If Dominic Ducharme didn't succeed in Montreal, Pascal Vincent was linked to the Montreal organization, obviously given that he's fluent in French, and which is a requirement to be the head coach of the Montreal Canadiens. He was linked to the Habs organization. He was certainly thought of by a lot of people here in Winnipeg as a potential head coach in waiting, if Paul Maurice was to move along at any point in time. Whatever it might be, to me, it very much seems not necessarily like a promotion to go to be the assistant coach in Columbus, but at best, a lateral move to move from the Moose head coach to the assistant coach. I find it to be a very, very interesting move, I would say.
Yeah, and unexpected, right? Like we assumed, guys, that next season Pascal Vincent would be coaching the Moose, right? I don't think any of us, had heard anything that, Pascal was leaving the Jets organization. So yeah, Drew, you could look at it as a lateral move just in terms of, he was a head coach in the American Hockey League and now he's an assistant coach, but it's obviously not a lateral move in terms of, going up to the NHL, right? So, look, first off, I just want to say, it's going to, be sad to not see Pascal in the city of Winnipeg and in the Jets organization, because, we had him on the show, 2 or 3 times a year. We've probably had him on the show 20 times, over the last 5 or 6 years. And, obviously, Dave has, developed a personal relationship with Pascal, in addition to being an excellent coach who has a great track record of developing young players, right? Like whether that's a Kyle Connor, a Mason Appleton, Logan Stanley, whoever. He's just a good human being. Like I remember talking to him several times, at Bell MTS Place, Canada Life Center is what we have to call it now.
No. Back then you had the name right.
Sure, MTS Center or whatever. I don't even remember what it was anymore. But just talking to him, between intermissions at Jets games, that's when I would see him. I know, Dave has talked to him a lot more over the years, but just the nicest guy. Always gave you the time of day. You're not going to find anybody that says anything bad about him. Just a very smart hockey mind, and like I said, a good person. At the end of the day, guys, like it's about more than hockey. So, he's going to do an excellent job in Columbus. And in terms of what Dave said about him seeing a better opportunity in Columbus, yeah, that's kind of the way I view it, right? Like, Pascal, who knows? He might eventually become the head coach of the Blue Jackets, but for him, he's got to be thinking like, I'm young. If I do a good job as an assistant with Columbus, I could get an NHL job with another team.
Well, let me stop.
So I was just going to quickly, Drew. I was just going to say, like, I don't know if Pascal interviewed with Seattle, but that was a team that I thought. Let's be honest, guys. As soon as Rod Brind'Amour re-signed in Carolina, clearly Francis wanted Brind'Amour in Seattle. I think we all know that. They're good friends. And then as soon as former UND coach Dave Haxtell was hired in Seattle, obviously there's no more head coach openings, right? So, I just thought it would be interesting to know if Pascal interviewed with Seattle. But as Dave mentioned, from a report from Aaron Portzline, he interviewed in Columbus. And obviously, Jarmo Kekalainen and John Davidson, they really liked what they heard from Pascal. And that's why, they offered him the assistant coaching position. But it's obviously a great opportunity, for Pascal and a big loss for the Jets.
Well, something has had to change. Because here's a quote from Pascal Vincent when he was speaking with the Winnipeg Free Press last November. So November of 2020, about 8 months ago or so. Paul, that being Jets head coach Paul Maurice, and I are pretty close and pretty direct with one another. There's no games. So when Todd Woodcroft left, Paul and I had a conversation. Without him saying, him being Paul Maurice, without him saying, I'm offering you the job, he was asking me if I had any interest. I told him probably not, but give me a few days to think about this. And we spoke a few days later, and I told him I'm really happy where I am right now, that being the head coach of the Manitoba Moose. He said, I figured so, but needed to talk to you about it. So clearly what Pascal is saying there is that the opportunity to come back to the NHL level with the Jets existed last November. That's the job that eventually went to Dave Lowry. Instead of it, and Pascal, sounds like he said he turned it down and it's to stay with the Manitoba Moose. And then for whatever reason, he's decided that he no longer wanted to be the head coach of the Moose, and he wants to be the assistant coach in Columbus. So I do find it very interesting that last November, he wasn't interested in being an assistant coach, but this June, he was interested in being an assistant coach.
Well, the difference obviously, Drew, is, different organization, right? And
sure.
That's why it's like, and I'll let Dave get in here because he obviously, knows Pascal really well, and he has much more insight on the Moose, even though I can provide some insight, but
not that much.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I just look at it, this is a great opportunity for him. And look we knew Pascal was not going to be the Moose coach forever, right? So, we thought he would be, the Moose coach to start the 21-22 season, Dave, but you knew it was only a matter of time. He's too good of a hockey coach. He was going to eventually, move on to bigger and greater things. So whether that's, an NHL head coach one day, we'll see. But, obviously, this is just a great move for him. He gets to be an assistant coach in the NHL again, and potentially a future head coach. So I agree, Drew. It was a little bit unexpected and maybe a lateral move in some people's eyes. But I think Columbus just saw a really good hockey coach, and they think he can really help their team.
There's no question, Dave, that Pascal Vincent will help the Columbus Blue Jackets. He'll help any team that he's behind the bench of. We're biased, admittedly, but he's done a great job, with the Manitoba Moose. Sometimes with the Manitoba Moose, Dave, as you know better than anybody in the city, we're very lean in terms of the talent that they were really putting out on the ice. There were, his record, I don't think accurately reflects just how good of a job he did with the Manitoba Moose. His record, as the Moose head coach, 155, 139, and 31. Looking at those numbers, it doesn't jump out at you as anything that's overwhelming. But Dave, as well as anybody, better than anyone, that there were some times where he squeezed every last drop of juice out of a Manitoba Moose team that didn't really have, that much citrus in their players.
Yeah,
to torture an analogy.
Yeah, but I think it's fair. I feel
like an orange.
Yeah,
you haven't had an orange in your entire life.
Just walk over to the kitchen. You can grab an orange.
That's not true. I love mandarins.
So. No, it's interesting, Drew. And someone I had tweeted on, I tweeted yesterday or the day before saying it's a big loss for the organization. And someone said, how would you quantify it being a big loss? Because, his record is what you just stated, which is still obviously okay, but it's, it's not jumping off out at you. And I said, because organizationally, you don't look at him based on that metric of wins and losses. You're looking at him as to what he's done with the list of prospects he's been given. And it's not just him, and he'll be the first to admit, like Eric Dubois has done a very good job with the defensive prospects. Marty Johnston has done a very good job with the forward prospects. So it's not just Pascal alone who's been responsible for development. Guys like Mike Keane, Jimmy Roy, those guys are huge in terms of the development for the Manitoba Moose. So you're not going to give Pascal Vincent, and Pascal Vincent himself wouldn't take sole responsibility for what the prospects have done under his kind of eyes. But you also, it's unmistakable, right? And looking at the record specifically, in 2017-18, they had the best team in the AHL, and it wasn't even close. But then Mark Scheifele gets injured. Jack Roslovic, who's the best center, probably the best player in the AHL from what I saw, gets called up to the Jets. Then they lose Michael Hutchinson, who was playing like unbelievable. Like that November, they were untouchable. And then it's the reality of life in the AHL is roster volatility. And you don't have consistency in your roster oftentimes because you're kind of a slave to what the parent club is doing. And if the Jets have injuries, then you tend to lose your best players because that's what the AHL is generally doing, unless they're prospects like, for example, Cole Perfetti, who you're going to leave in the AHL because you want him to develop you don't want him in the NHL yet at that, from the Jets perspective. So to me, you don't judge him based on the wins and the losses, because to your point, rosters are just too volatile in the AHL. But you look at what he's been able to do in terms of prospect development, and that to me is unmistakable, right? Kyle Connor goes down to the AHL and, eventually goes up. Jack Roswick, look what he was able to do, like I said. And again, a lot of this is based on what the players are.
Sure.
But he's been able to help guys along and get to that next level. And I think it's just, to your point, Drew, it's just the manner in which he speaks with people, the honesty. I mean, guys, we've had him on, to Ezzy's point, so many times, and he doesn't sugarcoat. He'll never throw someone under the bus. He never says that player stinks or that player did this, but he's also very forthright and honest in his assessments. When we had him on in March for one of our shows, and he was talking about the things like a prospect like David Gustafson, like 2018 second rounder for the Jets, can do to get better, to get to that next level. And he's not tearing the player down. He's just telling you this matter of fact. This is what the guy needs to do. That's that level of honesty and forthright element that Pascal Vincent possesses that I think is going to serve him well in an NHL role.
It's a difficult needle to thread, to your point, Dave, about being honest with the player.
Can you sew, Drew? Do you do any sewing?
I cannot do any sewing. But being honest with a player, being honest with that player in the media when asked a direct question, to your point, he was always honest with us, but at the same time, not offending anybody. It's almost like it's not an easy skill set to learn, because a lot of, players potentially could get, upset if the comments are misconstrued or if they're taken to be too critical. But the way Pascal was able to deliver those messages, and we don't know necessarily what he did in private, but you have a pretty good idea that what he said publicly and what he said privately usually matched up. And as a result, players were able to take any critiques not as personal insults, but as both parties being aware that he's only striving to get players better, that his comments are designed to improve a player and better their chances and improve their trajectory to the next level of their development. That's a difficult needle to thread sometimes, and he seems like more often than not he was able to succeed in doing that with the Manitoba Moose. It's a big loss. I mean, it really, for an organization that, and this is just, we hear it ad nauseum, is draft and develop. Obviously, when Keith McCambridge was dismissed as head coach of the Manitoba Moose, or I guess the Ice Caps, he was
here for the first year.
Did he spend a year here? Okay, when he was dismissed, obviously the organization didn't feel that.
I don't think he was dismissed. I believe I'd have to look back. I think he was. I just don't think they renewed his contract.
Okay, well, when he was no longer the head coach, obviously they didn't feel that the development was happening in a manner that they needed it to. Pascal has stepped in and sort of seamlessly been able to continue that development. I mean, I'm sure that if you ask Logan Stanley, I'm sure would credit Pascal Vincent with a lot of his development from a guy who certainly seemed like he wasn't necessarily going to reach his standing as a first-round pick. Pascal Vincent and the rest of the coaching staff and the Moose obviously played a big role in helping so many of the players that you currently see, either on the Winnipeg Jets roster or trying to break through into the Winnipeg Jets roster. It's a big loss for the organization, and I'm not certain how or who they're going to fill that position with. I think that's the big unknown is the next coach of the Manitoba Moose in the organization right now, or are they going to look outside the organization for that position? I mean, it's certainly throws a wrinkle, I think, in the Jets offseason, Ezzy.
Yeah, there's no doubt that he's going to be tough to replace, but I imagine there will be a lot of people interested in that job, right? Sure. And you hear a lot of the coaches that are candidates for NHL head coaching positions. You can easily kind of connect the dots. Like a guy like Scott Sandelin, who obviously, is the head coach of the University of Minnesota Duluth. There's the Duluth connection there. I'm not saying that, True North is going to hire Scott Sandelin, but I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if you see a coach from the college ranks make the jump to the AHL, because we know that if you look throughout the NHL, the vast majority of NHL head coaches were head coaches in the American Hockey League, right? We could put together a laundry list of NHL head coaches who got their, start in the AHL. So I think, that list is going to be a long one. And it's possible that, Kevin Cheveldayoff and Craig Heisinger, that, they have, one or two guys at the top of the list. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And it could be, maybe, Eric Dubois does get that promotion, but I do think it's going to be a very attractive job, because you just look at, all the good young players, that the Jets have drafted that have come through the Moose system. So I think that, it's going to be appealing for a lot of coaches that want to make that jump to the pro level, or maybe that are looking for, another job at the pro level. So yeah, I mean, you're never going to replace Pascal. He's a very unique coach, an excellent coach, but I do think that the Jets will replace him with somebody who's very capable and who's probably going to do a really good job. But yeah, right now, I don't think there's anybody that necessarily has the inside track that I'm aware of. I think there's going to be a lot of speculation. You're going to hear some familiar names and everything like that. Yeah, I mean, there's just no doubt about it that it's going to be a big loss. But again, good for Pascal. I mean, right? Like that's how this business works, right? You move on when you have an opportunity, and it is a great opportunity for him.
Dave, I mean, you obviously know the Moose better than anybody in the city. Would you think that they'd look internally as their first sort of look for the replacement of Pascal Vincent, or do you think that this is going to be somebody that comes in from the outside of the organization, knowing what you know about Eric Dubois, knowing what you know about Marty Johnston, knowing what you know about the Moose organization? Is this going to be, obviously, I'm asking you to prognosticate here, but would you suspect that this is going to be an internal promotion, or do you think it's going to be somebody coming from the outside?
It's a good question, Drew. I haven't. It's funny. I haven't yet turned my focus to who will be Pascal's replacement, because, of course, we're still so focused on the fact that he's leaving the organization. So I would imagine that they'll obviously get opportunity if Eric Dubois and Marty Johnston want that role. They'll for sure have an opportunity to apply for it, and I'm sure that Pascal Vincent is going to say nothing but good things about what they've been able to do, like I said, for the organization and for the players. And I know how much the players like these guys. Like, that's the one thing that's always conveyed to me from the players, is their appreciation for what those guys bring. So, and you can look at the crop of defensemen that have come through the organization and have, blossomed under Eric Dubois and then gone on to the Winnipeg Jets. It's a long list, right? And there's a really good crop. I don't need to go over it right now, but there's a really good crop of young prospect defensemen that Eric Dubois is working with. So certainly, I think if they would want that opportunity, they can apply for it. I don't know. I just, it's one thing. It's an interesting thing about assistant coaches. You don't generally talk to them. Like, I see them around the rink. I know them. They know me. But sure, I don't have a general sense, because I don't talk to those guys on a regular basis the way I would obviously with Pascal Vincent. So assistant coaches are often like kids, seen but not heard. Yeah, no, it's true. And so it's a function of like I said, I don't know what their ambitions are and whether that is something that's within their purview. But I certainly think that they'll get a shot. And if not, then yeah, like as he says, I could see a guy, from college or a junior coach. Like in my head, I was like, Pascal came from. In my head, I was like, okay, well, so how does this going to work? They're going to hire Dave Manson, and they're going to trade for Josh Manson. That's definitely the way this is playing out. But I don't know. I mean, like I said, I haven't really turned my focus. I haven't started bugging anybody in the organization to get a sense as to what is happening with the head coaching position, just simply because it's so fresh with Pascal just being announced a couple of days ago.
Right. And another guy that I've heard out there is Nolan Baumgartner, for his obvious connections, former captain of the Moose. He's an assistant with Vancouver, longtime assistant with Utica in the American Hockey League. But again, he might be happy in Vancouver. So there's a lot of names like Scott Arneal for the obvious connections. But again, do these guys want to go from an assistant coach in the NHL to a head coach in the American Hockey League? I have no idea. But I do think, there's a good chance that it's going to be, somebody that maybe isn't as familiar to the Jets, right, Drew? So, we mentioned a guy like Scott Sandelin, right? Like, I think he wants to be an NHL head coach, but maybe he, would like to start in the American Hockey League. And then you hear another guy that has been rumored to be a future NHL head coach is Lane Lambert, who's been a longtime assistant coach with Barry Trotz. But again, does Lane Lambert want to wait to become an NHL head coach, or would he look at Manitoba and he'd say, I'd like to be a head coach in the American Hockey League. That's my best route. So again, we're throwing out a lot of names, but the reality is, Drew, Dave might be the Moose insider. Dave doesn't know right now. This is too new to know who. You can't throw out an exact name. You can only throw out potential names that make sense. That's why I mentioned Nolan Baumgartner.
The track record of U.S. college head coaches jumping from U.S. college to the NHL and succeeding is not great. You think about Dave Haxtell. I mean, he went from UND to Philadelphia. He didn't last long in Philly. Now, obviously, he's getting.
They made the playoffs the first year.
And more importantly, it's a lot of revisionist history because Philadelphia wasn't a team that was expected to do anything, and he did a pretty good job. I think I was talking to someone who said that I think they looked and the predictions were Philadelphia was everybody predicted Philly to miss the playoffs that first year. And he helped them. So I mean, it's always a little bit. But then after
that, they reverted backwards, and
no,
that's
you're
why
right, though, Drew. I mean, you're right. I mean,
David Quinn in New York.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's the one that I was going to say didn't quite work out, and that's why Gerard Gallant was hired, right? So I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's much more common. Again, going back to what we said before. I know Dennis is coming up in a few minutes here, but the list of coaches that have graduated from the American Hockey League to the NHL is much longer than the list of coaches that have graduated from NCAA to the NHL.
It certainly will be an interesting decision that True North is going to have to now come up with. I'm not sure that they necessarily expected this is going to be on their horizon this offseason, but you never know what wrinkles the offseason is going to bring, and this certainly counts as one of them. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, Dennis Beyak, voice of the Winnipeg Jets, is going to join us on the show. More Jets talk. Nice to see so many of you joining us in the chat on this Saturday morning. While you're here, if you haven't done so yet, smash the like button. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do that as well. More Jets talk with Dennis Beyak coming up next. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve Sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
It's Saturday morning. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. I'm not sure what that noise is. Dave, are you okay there? I think you were tripping up the stairs a little bit there, buddy. Dave and Ezzy showing off the professionalism that everyone has known and loved them for.
I think Dave was just that excited that Dennis was on.
We're pleased to welcome to the program, joining us from his palatial palace, Mr. Dennis Beyak, Winnipeg Jets broadcaster. Dennis, nice to see you, buddy. Good morning.
Gentlemen, it is good to be with you. How are you guys?
We're doing fine and dandy. Dennis, obviously great to be with you. Great to see you as well. Nice to see that you're back from Latvia. Did I hear correctly that you're now a member of Latvian royalty? Is that what the honor was bestowed upon you after the World Hockey Championships?
Well, actually, we did have letters from the Latvian embassy that we were welcome in Latvia for the World Championship. So I'm big in Denmark now because I called their first ever World Junior Championship back in Toronto days years ago, and now I have some official documentation from Latvia. So we'll see what happens down the road. Maybe I'll end up there. You never know. I doubt it though.
Dennis obviously brought you on to talk about the Jets and their offseason.
Dave, nice entrance by the way.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate that.
It's an ongoing. When we go to break, Dave and Ezzy have to have their 2 minutes of quality time together, and it's an ongoing joke that Dave can never make it back on the screen in time to not look like Chris Farley falling through the table on Saturday Night Live. But that's neither here nor there. Dennis, obviously we're going to talk about the Jets with you, and we'll get into that quickly. But I guess the big news of the week of the loss of Pascal Vincent to the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. We're not going to go deep into the Moose with you here, but just, your thoughts on your experience with Pascal Vincent over the last, at least more than a half decade, certainly.
Well, certainly it was a pleasure to be around. Just a terrific gentleman. We actually lived in the same building for a while in Winnipeg, so we spent some time together. Good for him. You know what? He did a real good job with the Winnipeg Jets, went on to the Manitoba Moose and did a terrific job there. And now gets the opportunity to get back in the National Hockey League with the Columbus Blue Jackets with a young head coach. I think that's the key to that move for Pascal Vincent. He's going in with a rookie head coach in the National Hockey League, and his experience will be relied on a lot. So good for him. Congratulations, and hopefully he'll enjoy Columbus.
Dennis, we want to get into the Stanley Cup final with you, obviously, and talk about those Montreal Canadiens in addition to the Tampa Bay Lightning. But we obviously want to, talk for the most part about, the Jets here. And, you've been covering this team since they came over from Atlanta. You're very familiar, with the organization. How would you say, this particular offseason is different? Because there was a obvious letdown in the second round versus the Montreal Canadiens. But would you say that, this is going to be a much different offseason, not just in terms of what, Kevin Cheveldayoff and the management group has to address, but just in terms of, where this team is at, and maybe, there being a little bit more urgency, to go a little bit further in the playoffs in the 21-22 season?
Yeah, I think it's more specific as to what they need. I think as you grow as an organization, you go from just looking at who's out there that can help your hockey club, and that's maybe a wider stable than what they're looking at now. I think they have a real good idea right now of what they need to get to that next level, and that's going to be the challenge for them. Is that player or players out there, and what's it going to take to get them into a Winnipeg Jets jersey and into the organization? So those are the challenges in a bit of a shorter summer. Add to that dealing with the expansion draft that's coming up for the Seattle Kraken, almost said Seattle Thunderbirds, and and it's going to be a busy summer. But I think that's probably the difference. I think they can zero in on more of what they need than a general view of, okay, how do we improve this hockey club? I don't think there's a lot of holes on this team. They know what the areas of concern are, and that's going to be the challenge.
Dennis, a player who had just a phenomenal opportunity and just a bizarre year was Cole Perfetti. And we saw everything he did from the World Juniors to the AHL, ultimately in the World Championships, and that opportunity, the growth he got. But next year, because he's not able to play in the AHL, it's an NHL or OHL situation for him. Do you think it's, I guess it's a two-parter. One, how likely is it, do you think, that we see him in the NHL full-time next year? And do you think there's time for an exemption rule? Because I know how desperate the OHL is to have guys like this, but it's almost like an unfair situation for a player like Cole Perfetti, who was able to do what he was able to do with men, to have to go back to the OHL if unable to make the NHL.
Yeah, I spent too many years in junior to think that another year in junior hockey is ever going to hurt you. But I know where you're coming from, and I understand that. He did make strides this year. There's no doubt. Years ago, there was an exemption, but the payday to a junior team was enormous back then. But that's when you were dealing with buildings that sat 2,500, 4,000 people. So the money you got from the National Hockey League was huge. The money that junior operators can make now, because they're dealing with 5,000 and 6,000 and 7,000 seat buildings, in some cases bigger than that, that player is key for you from a financial standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, and from a simply win standpoint. So, it's been a topsy-turvy year in all leagues, including the CHL. I know the Western Hockey League is going to a different schedule next year. But back to Cole Perfetti, he made strides with the Manitoba Moose this year. So he took advantage of that situation. I think if you talk to Pascal Vincent, other people, and you follow the Moose more than anyone, Dave, so you have a better handle on this than anybody. From the start of the year to the end of the year, he learned how to play with men. I think that was the biggest difference. At the World Championship, I was on the other pool, so I didn't see him play live. But we did drive back with Gord Miller and Mike Johnson to and from the rink to the hotel every day, and they saw him play every game. So they thought he certainly made some strides. I know MJ made the comment once, like to see him shoot the puck a little bit more. But that was a learning experience for him, and I think he took advantage of it and made himself as best as he can ready for the National Hockey League next year. I think some of that's going to depend on what happens with Pierre-Luc Dubois, where he ends up. If he ends up on the wing, then I think there's going to be a spot at center for him to take a serious run at. If Pierre-Luc Dubois ends up back in the middle, then that challenge becomes a little more of a bigger hill for him to climb. But he certainly did make some strides this year.
Dennis Beyak, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms. Dennis, I guess I'll piggyback off that last answer. You mentioned Pierre-Luc Dubois. Obviously, his abbreviated first year in Winnipeg did not turn out like he wanted. From your perspective, is he a centerman or is he a winger? Because I think that sort of inconsistency may have impacted his playing this past season, and without Paul Stastny, if he doesn't re-sign with the Jets, it seems like you almost need to have Dubois as a center more than a winger.
I like him at center. I think if you can have Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Adam Lowry as your top three centers, I think you're in a pretty good situation down the middle. I think that's where he's more comfortable at. He's played wing, yes, but I think the Winnipeg Jets see him. If the lawnmower outside gets too loud, just let me know. I'll shut the door.
You're fine so far.
I do think the Winnipeg Jets see him as a centerman, and I think that's where he has to come to camp, and that has to be his mindset coming in, is that I've got that number 2 spot behind Mark Scheifele on my schedule, and that's what I have to train for. That's what I have to prepare for. So I think big centermen are hard to find, especially skilled, and I know you could look at his stats this year and say maybe he's not as skilled as they thought he was. I just think if you go back over his other years in the National Hockey League and his years coming out of junior, and that the stats are there to prove that this guy can play. And he had a tough go in Winnipeg, there's no doubt. And maybe that did play a part of it. But I think there'll be plenty of conversations, and already has, between Paul Maurice and Pierre-Luc Dubois as to giving him the best opportunity to be the best player he can be for the Winnipeg Jets next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I asked you about the Jets off season, and I agree, Dennis, with the expansion draft coming up, the NHL draft, it's obviously going to be, very busy, but I kind of wanted to tie in the Stanley Cup final, the Montreal Canadiens again, because obviously, there are some similarities between these two teams in that, Marc Bergevin clearly, saw a team that was, several players away, but he knew that he could address it in the offseason. So, I know you hear a lot about, what other NHL teams, what the lessons they can learn from the Montreal Canadiens run, but just looking at, the totality of the moves, right? Like whether it's bringing in, a Joel Edmondson from Brandon, or whether it's bringing in, a Corey Perry or a Tyler Toffoli. Do you think, Kevin Cheveldayoff is looking at what Marc Bergevin did, and he's saying that, not only could I bring in maybe a defenseman, but, maybe I can bring in a Corey Perry type of player or a Joel Edmondson type of player, bring in maybe a little bit more of that kind of veteran experience. Like, is that kind of what you see, the Montreal Canadiens run, that the lesson that maybe the Jets are learning from that run?
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the Winnipeg Jets do with that fourth line, whether Nate Thompson comes back, whether Trevor Lewis comes back, because that was kind of the idea there. I do think coaches, and Luke Richardson is going through it right now with Don Ducharme out, I think coaches do like a line like the Winnipeg Jets had on that fourth line, and like the Montreal Canadiens have right now with Eric Stahl and Joel Armia and with Corey Perry. So what is interesting is that Corey Perry was supposed to be an on and off player. Wasn't supposed to be a regular player for the Montreal Canadiens, but I think we're seeing his DNA that we've seen over the years in the National Hockey League come to the core here, and he's been a very, very impactful player for the Montreal Canadiens. So yeah, there's lessons to be learned. Mark Bergevin went out and realized they needed some size on the back end, and went out and got Joel Edmondson, a steady defenseman who isn't flashy by any stretch of the imagination, had a Stanley Cup under his belt, solid defenseman, solid individual, and added him to that top four for the Montreal Canadiens, and that's turned out very well. So that's back to what we were talking about, and you guys have talked about this, is being specific in what you need. Target what you need and try and go out and get it. Targeting what you need and going out and getting it are two totally different things here. But, Mark Bergevin, again, took a lot of heat this year. Carey Price took a lot of heat. What's interesting is the Vegas Golden Knights trade Nick Suzuki for Max Pacioretty, and yet Suzuki was a more impactful player in this series than what Pacioretty was in that last series. So now you take it even further. Sergachev for Tampa, Jonathan Drouin not in the lineup for the Montreal Canadiens. So there's lots of sidebar stories to go along with what's coming up here for the Stanley Cup Final. But we saw the elation from Mark Bergevin when I had a couple of non-hockey fans kind of say to me yesterday, "Who was that guy in the burgundy suit?" And he certainly was happy with the fact that Canadians are getting to the Stanley Cup Final.
Dennis Beyak, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. You're watching, you're chatting, you're tuning into our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.
Dennis, we're less than a month away from the expansion draft, and I think it's going to be fascinating because the Vegas one isn't that far in the past that we can look to that as an example. Not necessarily Jet specific, but obviously it's going to have a big impact on the Jets because we don't know what they're going to do, what Kevin Cheveldayoff and his group are going to do in terms of trying to protect a guy like Logan Stanley, who they put so much time and effort in. They saw the fruits of their labor with him, but he could be a player that is, a loser, Mason Appleton. But do you think teams are going to be as inclined to trade to do what they were doing with Vegas this time around with Seattle?
Well, they'll try. And then that's going to be the challenge for Ron Francis is to try and accomplish, what George McPhee did and Kelly McCrimmon did with the Vegas Golden Knights. Are we going to be able to get an Alex Tuck out of Minnesota? Or our general manager is going to be a little bit leery about making those kind of deals simply because of what happened with the Vegas Golden Knights. But I still think general managers are going to do what they think is best for their hockey club. And then it's going to be up to Ron Francis and his staff to decide, is this good for us or is this not good for us? I still think there's going to be some players next year where we're going to look at it, and whether it's a William Karlsson type player, whether it's an Alex Tuck type player, we're going to look at that Seattle roster and say, why did Team X let that player go? But every team has needs and wants, and they make moves to try and fit what's best for their team. So I still think you're going to have some surprises, and you're going to have some of that simply because you're going to have players who maybe weren't given an opportunity in the organization that they're with. They're going to get the opportunity to get more minutes, be higher up in the lineup, and they're going to take advantage of that. And just a guy like William Karlsson is the guy that comes to mind.
Dennis, I look at the Jets off season, and it's certainly going to be a busy off season, but I don't think it's quite as busy as some of the recent off seasons that the team has had. You look at the two big RFAs, and that's right. Neal Pionk and Andrew Copp. Andrew Copp, obviously we know who he's represented by. Kurt Overhart, certainly a hard driving agent to say the least. They've been to arbitration before, both sides. He is arbitration eligible again. What do you see happening with Andrew Copp and his long-term future here in Winnipeg? 1 year away from UFA status. So the Jets obviously don't want to, walk him into UFA status after this year. But do you think that they're going to be able to get him under contract for a longer term deal than that?
Well, that's going to be the challenge. The players' camp is going to push for either, if you want to protect yourself against this player going to the market as an unrestricted free agent, then show me the money. and the team is going to come back and try and limit that. They want to try and limit the dollars, as they always do, and rightfully so, because you've got a cap to deal with. It's not going up. But you also have a player that's an interesting individual. You've got a player that plays 5-on-5, kills penalties, plays the power play, good in the room, bit of a leader, good on faceoffs. So Andrew Copp has lots going for him. So now it's going to be to try and find that balance between dollar value, term, unrestricted free agency around the corner. The interesting part comes is if the Winnipeg Jets can't get Andrew Copp signed to a deal prior to the expansion draft, do they trade him? Do they make a deal to kind of get something back? You don't want to lose Andrew Copp to unrestricted free agency and then lose another player. You're not going to protect Andrew Copp because you don't have him signed, and lose Mason Appleton and then find out that you can't sign Andrew Copp. You don't want to lose two players out of this. So that's the challenge going forward, and both sides know there's a deadline. I think Andrew Copp likes his situation in Winnipeg, plays up the lineup every now and then. So it's going to come down to a dollar value, and I mean, you hear numbers all over the board, and there's going to be comparisons out there to other players. I mean, from a Jets standpoint, if you can get Andrew Copp to at least a 3-year deal, maybe a 4. That balances out a little bit better. Is there going to be a 4 in front of his per annum paycheck? Probably. And so now it's trying to find out where everything fits. But going into it, I think they'll get Neal Pionk done. I think that's going to be maybe easier to get done than Andrew Copp. But then you've got back to what Dave said. What do you do with Logan Stanley? Who do you protect on that back end going into that expansion draft with Seattle? So those are the challenges. And you're right, there maybe isn't as many players for Kevin Cheveldayoff to sign. But for him and Larry, I think there's going to be a lot of hours spent on trying to get Andrew Copp under contract.
Dennis, before I ask you my next question, I just have to say I love the birds chirping in the background there with you in Kelowna, and that combined with the waves crashing on Dave's TV behind him, it's creating a very tranquil atmosphere here on the Illegal Curve show, as opposed to the usual chaos that we're used to. But I wanted to ask you about your experience in Riga, and I have to say for everybody listening, I felt bad because in late May, as you know, I texted you to come on Illegal Curve to talk about the Jets Oilers sweep, and then I get a text back from Dennis saying, Ezra, I'm in Latvia right now. You're going to have to try to get somebody else. So I felt bad. I texted Dave after. Yeah. How did I forget that? But specifically, Dennis, I wanted to ask you. Obviously, you've traveled around the world covering the World Hockey Championships and the World Juniors, and I just wanted to ask you about this year's tournament, because obviously Canada loses those early games and then comes back and wins the gold medal. So what was this year's experience like for you, and particularly calling the games and then just watching Canada win the gold when it looked like they might not even make it to the medal round?
If you're wondering about the birds, it's 10-8 here, so they're just kind of getting up this morning as well. Okay. It was, it was a different tournament, and you're right. I mean, this coffee cup is the one from Moscow a number of years ago. So we didn't do as much socializing this year for a number of reasons. Number one, there wasn't very much open when we first got to Riga. It was much like Winnipeg. Restaurants were closed, patios were open, but the weather wasn't conducive to spending time on the patio. It was chilly, it was rainy. And then once the tournament gets going, there really just isn't a lot of time. It's Groundhog Day. Once the tournament gets going, we do 28 games in the first 12 days. So opening weekend, you do 8 games in 3 days. You got 2 on the Friday, 3 on the Saturday, 3 on the Sunday. So, but there's a positive to that, is after that opening weekend, you've now seen every team twice. And then the job becomes a little bit easier. Then you can kind of get a little more specific into who's doing what and some of the background information. I'll be honest, the first weekend, all you're really doing is trying to identify a number to a name. And there were challenges. Because there was no tournament last year, so you're 2 years removed from seeing some of these players and some of these teams. With the NHL season running late, there were some players that normally wouldn't be at the World Championship, but they were there. Some of the other teams, like Norway and Denmark, those teams don't change much. Finland was pretty much a totally different team. I'll get to the Canada situation in a second here. And then as it got going, the weather got better, but we come back to a dark hotel. Normally we would come back and on every second night, maybe every third night, you'd have a beer or two, and then you go back up to your room, do a little more work, and get ready for the next day. We didn't have any of that. We came back to a dark hotel. The bar in the lobby bar was closed. The restaurant was closed. So there was really none of that. So you spent a lot of time in your room. But there was also teams were allowed to carry extra players, 3 extra players. So if you got 8 teams to get ready for, which we had on our side, that's really preparing for another team. So that took a little bit extra time. And then there was more movement in and out than we normally see because of the lateness of the NHL and everything else. Canada was a real good story. I mean, you talk about what Gerard Gallant did with Vegas, pulling that team together. And yeah, there were some outside things that happened that weren't very, pleasant in Vegas to start there that I think did help draw that team together in year one. But I think Gerard Gallant did a real good job. And I think that was some of his challenge here, was to pull that Canada team together as quickly as possible. And then, of course, along comes Andrew Mangiapane, and he immediately becomes the scoring guy that they needed. That they were lacking that one offensive star. And in that tournament, one offensive player can do a lot of damage for you, can be a big benefit for you. And I think we see that, whether it be a Sven Andrighetto that spent some time in the National Hockey League, or a player like that. It just takes that one guy sometimes, and then they got on that run. And what's crazy is some of the things that they needed to have happen that didn't involve them. They needed another game that needed to go to overtime. It didn't matter who won the game, but they needed that game to go to overtime, and it went to overtime. So they had some things go for them from that standpoint. Then they caught fire, and away they went, and good on them. They came together as a team, and you guys have been around sports long enough to know that sometimes you catch that spark and you get on that wave that Dave has in behind him there. And you ride that wave to the bitter end, and it took them right to the gold medal.
Dennis Beyak, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media channels.
Dennis, one of the things that people always are clamoring for is the youth. And I'm a guy who, to your point about the AHL, I think it's always a good place for guys to develop. You can make a mistake. And when Pascal Vincent was the head coach, he didn't staple you to the bench unless it was very egregious. He would, pull you aside, say, this is a teachable moment, and then he'd put you right back up for that next shift. And I can think of a play Dylan Sandberg made where he made a pinch along the wall. And how many people in Winnipeg actually saw it, right? Not many, Dennis. But the reality is he did that. It led to a goal. Johnny Kovacevic had to defend a 2-on-1, and it ends up in the back of the Moose net. That's fine because it's a development league, and you learn from that mistake, and it's not the end of the world. At the NHL level, it's a lot different. The microscope, as you know, is a lot more focused. But having said that, there's certain players who I think are ready for that jump. So you talked about that idea of a veteran fourth line, but what do you do with a player like a David Gustafsson, who really has done everything that you've asked him to do at that AHL level? He's played the top line center role. He's penalty killed. He's power played. So how do you find a spot obviously he's got to earn that spot. That's his responsibility in training camp. But do you think that the Jets would be prepared if he is able to do that, have a good offseason, to give him that responsibility of that fourth line center role?
I think so. And I say that on the basis that as the trade deadline draws near, I think you can always find a veteran player that a team is looking to move. So you might be able to, if you wanted to add some experience at that point, you might be able to add a veteran there. But I'm with you 100%. I think there comes a time when these young players have to be given the opportunity to advance in your organization. And I think David Gustafsson is at that spot right now. He's had some world championship experience. He's played in the American Hockey League now. He's got some NHL games under his belt. And this is a big off season for him. He needs to come to camp and convince Paul Maurice that I am good enough to play in that fourth line center spot. The advantage he has is he's very good defensively. It's not like you're trying to take a Cole Perfetti, who's a very good offensive player, and put him into a fourth line center spot. Right. David Gustafsson knows that role because that's the role that he's played. He's not going to get you 50 goals in a year, but he's going to contribute good on faceoffs, and that's what you want, good on penalty kill. And that's going to be that might be the area that makes or breaks it for David Gustafsson. Can he be a penalty killer for Paul Maurice? And if he can keep his face-off numbers where they need to be, it's the little things that will get him there. We all know as we watch him develop and watch him play what he can do big picture. It's the little things. Can he be a penalty killer? Can he win those key face-offs in his own end of the ice? But I'm with you. I think some of those young players need to be given the opportunity at training camp to show. It was a different training camp. It was different last year. There was no preseason games, and that probably hurt some players. They didn't get the opportunity to show what they can do. But I think that has to happen come this year's training camp with a lot of those young guys.
Last question for you, Dennis. Tampa Bay or Montreal? Can Cinderella keep it going?
Well, Tampa Bay is a very good team. First off, it was just, you know what, we did so many games from old veterans, Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum on Long Island there. It was great to see the atmosphere in that building. And, you know, it was a good run for the New York Islanders. But Tampa Bay is a very good team. But what the Montreal Canadiens have accomplished is special. And, you know, to be down 3-1 to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I wonder if that didn't play a part in what happened with the Winnipeg Jets. I wonder if the Winnipeg Jets spent so much time preparing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then all of a sudden in 48 hours you had to change and prepare for the Montreal Canadiens. So, but give the Canadiens credit, the entire coaching staff, because they're without Don Ducharme right now. But they got the big four on the back end. Petrie did miss some games. It's tough to get inside on them. You've got Carey Price. And I think this is going to be a challenge. I do think if the wild card is going to be Nikita Kucherov. How hurt is he? Is he going to be in game 1 against the Montreal Canadiens? If Nikita Kucherov is playing at 65%, then I think that really helps Montreal's chances. If Nikita Kucherov is playing at 85 or 90%, then I think between him and Braden Point, I think the Canadiens are going to have a challenge defensively, especially with Tampa having home ice advantage in that. But anytime you have Carey Price, I think it's very difficult to bet. Again, you know, him getting hurt down the stretch was probably the best thing that happened to the Montreal Canadiens. Shea Weber getting hurt down the stretch was probably the best thing that happened to the Montreal Canadiens. So you wonder if there isn't something magic around this team right now, and you have to get on those rolls. Bottom line, I'm still going to stick with Tampa. I think they're 4 lines deep, and if they can stay healthy, and if Nikita Kucherov is at 85 or higher percent health-wise, I can see the Tampa Bay Lightning repeat. But I think every hockey fan, and that's what we are now, we're hockey fans, I think you really appreciate what the Montreal Canadiens are doing, and somewhere deep inside, you have to pull for them because of what they went through this past year, coaching change and everything else around that team. And it's a good team. It shows the, you know, and you know what, Kenny Holland referred to the Winnipeg Jets when he talked about that after the Jets swept the Oilers, this team concept. And I think that's what we're seeing with the Montreal Canadiens too. So I think it's going to be a very good series. It's great out here. You almost hope for overtime when you're out here because the games start at 5 o'clock. So you don't mind the overtime at all. It can go 3-4 overtime periods and you're still getting to bed at a decent time, as long as the beer doesn't run out. But I'm expecting a good series, but I think Tampa, as long as they can stay healthy, will prevail.
Dennis Beyak is the voice of the Winnipeg Jets. You all know that. He joins us from his off-season abode in British Columbia. Dennis, it's great to see you, buddy. Thanks for waking up early with us. I hope you have a tea time or something. Looks like a beautiful day in the background there.
Actually, the tea time was tomorrow, but we're heading to temperatures in the 40s, so I don't know if I'm not sure if that tea time is going to have somebody on the tee box or not. But and I don't mind the hot weather, but that's hot.
To be clear, we're talking 40 degrees Celsius, not
Correct.
Fahrenheit.
Correct. Yes. But no, hey, you guys keep doing what you're doing. Great platform here, much needed, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Dennis. We'll see
Thanks,
you back
Dennis.
in Winnipeg very soon.
Yep. Take care, man.
Take care. There he goes. Dennis Beyak, good friend of ours, good friend of all Winnipeg Jets fans. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Blake Wheeler, his usage for the upcoming season. Craig Button joins us in about 15 minutes time. Much more Jets talk to come. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve Sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now here on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. Dave Manouk is in my top right. Ezra Ginsburg is beneath both of us. Gentlemen, hour number 2 starts with a conversation about Blake Wheeler, Winnipeg Jets captain, and his usage for the upcoming season. We know that Wheeler's year was, I think, at best up and down. There were certainly some very low marks where the topic du jour was what's wrong with Blake Wheeler. He got better at times as the year went on. But is this the offseason where Wheeler himself, as the captain of the Winnipeg Jets, and Jets management have to have that hard discussion with him about accepting a change in his role for next year? Not saying he's going to be on the fourth line or anything, because that's clearly not what it's going to be. But is it time that they sit down with Wheeler and, agree that it's time for a guy like Nikolai Ehlers to get those increased minutes, and maybe less is going to be more for Blake Wheeler success-wise?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know if the two are related, because I think we've been talking about, I'm talking about Ehlers and Wheeler, Drew, because we've been talking about this for a long time, that, Ehlers is the most dynamic offensive player and he should be on the first power play unit, even though the second power play unit at times, guys, really looked like the first power play unit. But I don't know, it's a good question, Drew, but I don't necessarily know if that's a difficult conversation. Like, let's be honest here, guys. I think Blake Wheeler, knows that, there are elements of his game that aren't as good as they were 3 or 4 years ago, right? Like, he has to know that. Like, he's just not the same player. But, having said that, I mean, he was almost a point per game player this past season with 46 points in 50 games, and he was pretty good in the playoffs as well. But I think, it goes back to what we were talking about a lot during the regular season, in that a lot of Blake Wheeler's damage is done on the power play. and at even strength, he hasn't been producing like he did, say, back in 2017-18. So absolutely, I think a conversation needs to happen in terms of Wheeler's role potentially changing. Whether that means, Drew, he's on the second power play unit, and whether that means he's on the second line. Like, I absolutely think Wheeler should have a lower role. I just don't think he's necessarily suited for a top line right wing role. It's just the reality based on the way he's played. And obviously, he can work really hard in the off season, and he can work on, some of the things, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, he's making $8.25 million. He's the highest paid forward on the Jets. So yeah, he's not going to be on the fourth line, and most likely he's not going to be on the third line. But I definitely think, you're going to see a guy who, has a decreased role on the team. It doesn't mean Wheeler's not an important player for this team. He's the captain, of course. But he's just not able to do, think about when Blake Wheeler used to, break down, the right wing or even the left wing with his speed and cut in and score those highlight type of real goals. At 34 years old, I'm not saying he can't do that. He just doesn't do it as much as he used to. So I think it's just really a reality check. But I think it would be ridiculous to say that, Wheeler is going to be off the power play units and, he's going to be a checker next year. It's not going to happen. But I do think, that his role on the team absolutely has to be, I don't know if you want to call it analyzed, or it has to be revisited, amongst the Jets coaching staff.
Almost tweaked to some extent, Dave. I mean, to quote Mark Twain, the reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. Yeah, Mark Twain was a more prolific writer, but to quote Mark Twain,
I think Mark Twain played on our softball team.
Yeah, to quote Mark Twain, I'll try that one again about reports of his death being greatly exaggerated. Do you think there's an element of that with Blake Wheeler? I mean, he's not the same player he was 4 or 5 years ago when he was, say, an all-star right winger in the NHL. And I don't mean, all-star game. I mean, end of year all-star when the NHL comes out with their all-star teams. But, do you think that there's, that everybody writing him off might provide him a little bit more fuel entering this coming season when it starts in October again?
Well, who knows? Because according to the players, they never listen to what the media is saying anyway. So I'm not so sure that would be an opportunity for them to fuel up based on their claims. Look, I think there's sometimes opportunity knocks when you have less responsibility. I think that if you can have a player like a Nikolai, did you bring on the Mark Train? That's funny. Way to go, Leighton Dennis. But I think it's one of those situations, Drew, that it may be an opportunity for him. If you're giving a guy like Nikolai Ehlers, who at his age and his ability is ready for a first line wing role on this Jets team, and you can argue, which I think Paul Maurice has tried to, that maybe his level of success is because of the minutes that he's been given. But maybe it's time to see if that success continues with elevated minutes, and maybe for Blake Wheeler, reduced role, reduced minutes. And we're not talking, there's not a huge disparity between what a first line winger and a second line winger on this Jets team really in terms of usage play. But maybe that's a better opportunity for Blake Wheeler. And, he and Pierre-Luc Dubois, as we talked about, can form some chemistry, get that opportunity to kind of, help Pierre-Luc Dubois along in his game with the Winnipeg Jets within the system of the team. And then you have that opportunity for Blake Wheeler to continue to have success on the power play, because if you're playing less minutes, especially you're no longer playing against that top D pairing, your body might be a little bit fresher, maybe a greater opportunity for Blake Wheeler and for the team. So, I mean, ultimately, I actually don't even know. Like, to me, Blake Wheeler, for all of his prickliness sometimes, ultimately, I don't see him as an I guy. Like, he is a team guy. And if he knows that what's best for this team is for him to be on the second line wing, in a second line wing role, then he'll play a second line wing role. And if it means that the Jets are going to be a better team, have more success, I don't see him at this point in his career looking for success. I really do see him looking for team success. And so ultimately, I just don't see Blake Wheeler having any issues with a, quote, reduced role or reduced capacity for him on this Jets team.
Does Paul Maurice know that? Does Paul Maurice subscribe to the less might be more when it comes to Blake Wheeler? Or has he got such blinders on when it comes to sort of that first line of Scheifele and Wheeler that he can't think outside the box? I mean, he just it's his comfort zone. It is his comfort level having Scheifele and Wheeler together playing the biggest minutes. I don't know, and I'm asking you guys your opinion. I don't know if Paul Maurice can sort of mentally get over that hurdle.
Yeah, and what I think is as important, Drew, as first line versus second line, or first power play unit versus second power play unit, is who is driving these lines, right? Like, and we talked about Nick Ehlers, and the two guys that drive the lines are Nick Ehlers and Mark Scheifele. Those are your two best offensive players, your two best play drivers. Blake Wheeler is not a play driver anymore. Like, he's great on the power play, right? Like, he can set up on the power play. Even once in a while, he'll rip a nice shot, right? But in terms of your question about Paul Maurice, I mean, I don't have the answer, right? Like, and I'm not giving you a cop-out answer here, Drew. I just, obviously, Wheeler has meant so much to this organization for the last 10 years, and specifically, over the last 4 or 5 years, just what he's done, not only to get the Jets into the playoffs, but, that 2018 run obviously stands out. But I think you have to look at, and Dave talks about this a lot, where is Blake Wheeler? Where are you putting him that gives him the best chance for success, right? Like, is that playing with Mark Scheifele? I would argue that it's probably playing with Pierre-Luc Dubois, because I think Nikolai Ehlers should be playing with Mark Scheifele. He's your most dynamic offensive player.
Let me stop you right there then, Ezzy. Then who drive? You just talked about it. Scheifele and Ehlers are your two best drivers. Is that mean that you need Dubois to be the driver of that second line? If Ehlers and Scheifele are together, and they're obviously that first line should succeed. It would be crazy to me that a line with, let's say, Connor, Scheifele, and Ehlers wouldn't succeed. Who's driving that second line to get the Jets a similar level of success?
Well, it's Pierre-Luc Dubois has to be better, guys. Like, we talked about that after the Montreal series, and obviously, Dubois had a tough year with his 2-week quarantine and the trade and everything like that, shortened season. But yeah, Dubois is going to have to be more of an offensive driver, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the other winger on that second line, right? Because Paul Stastny was the winger on that second line at times, and we don't know if he's going to be re-signed. So does that mean if Andrew Copp re-signs, he could be the winger on that second line, right? Like, could you have a second line of Andrew Copp, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Blake Wheeler? I would have no problem with that line, but I just think that what we're talking about here is, what is the ideal role for Wheeler? And it's at this point in his career, he's not enough of a play driver on that first line. Again, Wheeler should be in the top 6, in my opinion. Like, you can't put Blake Wheeler with Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton and ask him to play a checking role, in my opinion. I know there are some people in the chat that think he's more suited to be a third liner. I just don't think you can. I don't care what anybody says. You can't have a guy, your captain, making $8.25 million a year playing on the third line.
It's just that wouldn't be a role that he would be built for success, and nor are the Jets going to ask him to waive his no move clause to expose him to Seattle. I mean, I've seen some of those comments in the chat, and I appreciate the creativity, but it's just not realistically going to happen, no matter how much of a team guy Blake Wheeler is. And I have no reason, and he is very much, to Dave's point about the team. The team is not going to ask him that, and he's not going to accept that. It's just not. It's a non-starter. I mean, it was different given the circumstances with Toby Enstrom when they did that a number of years ago. It's not going to happen with Wheeler at this point in his career, Dave.
No. I mean, again, we're not talking. You're not playing Blake Wheeler on the fourth line, and nor should you. I mean, look, he still has a talent. To your point, Drew, he was. There's elements of his game that need to be improved. Why they played him when he was injured the way they did, or not at 100%. I mean, that's ultimately something that they have to figure out, why they would have chosen to do that when they could give him the opportunity to rest.
Yeah,
I understand these guys are warriors and they want to play and da. But
that's where the coach has to step in and say, Blake, you need the time off. We don't need you playing at especially 40% right now.
Especially at that point when the Jets really weren't having a lack of success, right? They were, they'd win 1 or 2, they'd lose, but they wouldn't on any sort of streaks where they had big concerns about their success for the season. So, look, I think everybody is kind of, we've hit that point, right? Like your Blake Wheeler still has an effective player, still can do a lot of good things for this Winnipeg Jets team. You're not removing him. But there's elements. I mean, look, I'm not putting it all on Blake Wheeler. Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor weren't great defensively this year. It's not as if somehow they were like defensive stalwarts and Blake Wheeler was an anchor around their necks. It's not that wasn't the case at all. And so, like, guys have to get better, period. Like, it's not just Blake Wheeler. This is that like Kyle Connor's flyby on the Foley shorthanded goal, notwithstanding, there's elements of, or withstanding, I should say, there's elements of all their games that need improvement. So, can you mix and match? And like, this group, while they've been good, has a lot to prove next year, right? I mean, you're going to have a really potentially, and Mike, I think, was saying this in the chat. I'm inclined to agree with him. I think a full training camp for Pierre-Luc Dubois, an opportunity to be in Winnipeg for the summer. He'll be here. His parents are here. He'll have the full training camp with the team. And even though it's a shortened offseason, he'll still have that opportunity to rest, recover, get ready with these guys, skate with these guys before training camp even really gets going. He'll be much more comfortable. I think you're going to have an excellent 1-2 punch in Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think the wingers are almost interchangeable at that point, because if you have both guys going, you're going to have an effective. And again, what do we talk about? What do we talk about when they acquire Pierre-Luc Dubois? It's all about center depth with this team. Yeah. And we're seeing it with Montreal with success in the forward depth. So it's center depth, sorry. So that's just going to be critical for this Jets team next year.
Let's leave the Wheeler conversation right there. We're pleased to welcome back to the program TSN Director of Scouting, a good friend of ours, Craig Button, joins us on the line right now to talk about the upcoming NHL draft, to talk about the Stanley Cup Finals. Craig, good morning. Nice to see you. How are you, buddy?
Oh, things are good. Nice to see you guys on this nice summer day. How are things in Manitoba?
Things in Manitoba, well, our restrictions have loosened. We've moved from code red to code orange, so people can go out and have a drink on a patio with a buddy starting, I believe, at 11 a.m. this morning. So I think people are feeling pretty good about that sort of thing.
Yeah, I know. It's been significant sacrifice by so many people across the country, and I think we see the path forward. So happy for everybody. Hopefully in the weeks to come, we can see more and more of that interaction with the people we love and our friends and everything that goes with it.
Absolutely, Craig. Well said. Obviously, we brought you on to talk about the upcoming NHL draft. It's less than a month away, but before we get into that, I have to start with the Stanley Cup Final now. Now that we know the two teams, to no one's surprise, the Tampa Bay Lightning are there. They were a preseason favorite, obviously the defending Stanley Cup champion. I think to everyone's surprise, the Montreal Canadiens are there. Can Cinderella's slippers still fit, or is this going to be where, I guess to torture that analogy, where the ball ends and she turns back into a pumpkin?
Well, here's what I would say, and I'm going to ask you guys a question after I give you my answer. But, when you think about the Montreal Canadiens, they're 11-2 since going down 3-1 to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And when you watch the way they've played, it's not accidental. I mean, there's times when teams get on a roll and you go, oh, geez, the goaltender's absolutely stood on his head. You got this break here and that break there. The Montreal Canadiens have been full marks. They have played really good right through their lineup. And, they beat good teams, the Winnipeg Jets included, the Vegas Golden Knights, where everybody thought Montreal would get steamrolled. But, the Minnesota Wild are a team that I would call a lowercase Montreal Canadiens team. Their goaltender isn't as good. Their blue line isn't as big and sturdy. And they don't have the offensive depth that the Montreal Canadiens have, specifically down the middle of the ice. And they took Vegas right to Game 7. They showed a path to how to beat the Vegas Golden Knights. And Montreal, did exactly that. So, you get I heard Steven Stamkos following the game last night after the Islanders, after Tampa Bay had won. And Steven said, he goes, we are going to face the best team we've seen in this year's playoff. Montreal is going to face the best team. That's what happens when you get to the Stanley Cup Final. You've won 12 games each. And again, and the 11-2 record in their last 13 games, I mean, that's pretty impressive. So do I think they have a chance? Absolutely, I think they have a chance. Absolutely. I thought it was a toss-up. I thought if they could do what they needed to do against Vegas, they could beat Vegas. And, they did exactly that. So, obviously, the clock's going to strike midnight for one of these two teams. And, John Cooper said, hey, winning the Stanley Cup is special. When you win 2 in a row, you put yourself in a special category. So, Montreal's trying to do something that hasn't been done by a Canadian team since '93, and it's certainly unexpected. And the Tampa Bay Lightning are a little bit more expected. Now, here's my question for you, and then you can come back to me. But, you guys watch all the time. I think Mark Scheifele is a superstar in the National Hockey League. And a lot of people, I don't think, share that view, not you guys. How much of a difference could have he made against the Montreal Canadiens in that series?
Obviously a world of difference, as we all know. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you think about the Habs, and to take nothing away from the run that they've been on, but they face a Toronto team that loses John Tavares, one of their top 2 centermen, with that terrible injury. The Jets without Scheifele, self-inflicted, whatever you think about the suspension from the Department of Player Safety. And Vegas, I mean, I don't think you can overstate, losing Chandler Stevenson. He doesn't have the cachet that Scheifele and Tavares have, but Chandler Stevenson being out for a few games was certainly, he's an important player to the Vegas Golden Knights. So Montreal, they don't need to apologize for that, but they are certainly fortuitous in some sense with the timing.
Well, and Chandler Stevenson on an important scale, but not as maybe as a lesser player. But they didn't just lose Mark Scheifele; they had a diminished Kyle Connor and a diminished Blake Wheeler. Which also helps right now. Now you don't have it. I mean, it's not that those guys don't try, and that's what happened with Chandler Stevenson going out. You got a diminished Mark Stone and a diminished Max Pacioretty, and the playoffs are about attrition, but. I think Mark Scheifele is a phenomenal player. I really do, and I'm not saying it would have been different, but the first game they played against Montreal wasn't a good one. But I can't think that Mark Scheifele couldn't have made that Winnipeg Jets team a more formidable challenge. When I talk about finding a way to win some games and making them uncomfortable.
No, absolutely, Craig, and I think we would all agree that aside from Connor Hellebuck, he's the one guy that you don't want to miss for 3 games in a series, right? And we wanted to ask you about. I'm not sure if a semi-trailer just went by there, but
the windows are open, Ezra, and and the windows will. I don't have air conditioning here in Calgary, so, and I mean we get those cool, but we're in the middle of what they're calling a massive heat wave, high 30s and everything. You're used to that in Manitoba.
We
usually don't get that here. So
we get at least a month and a half of summer every year, Craig. You know that. We want to get to the 2021 NHL draft, and obviously, the Jets, don't have the 10th overall pick. They're going to pick later in the first round. But wanted to ask you specifically about Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, because we have you on every single year, and we're obviously grateful that you've been joining us for around 10 years on the show. And I remember talking to you about Cole Caulfield, and some people thought he might go a little bit earlier, but 15th overall. A couple of years ago in the draft, and then you have Nick Suzuki. Obviously, Vegas drafts him, but then he's traded to Montreal. And I think you would agree that it's not a coincidence, that these 2 players, have had a big part in this Montreal Canadiens run. Because watching that line with Caulfield, Suzuki, and Toffoli, I mean, they were good against Toronto, obviously good against Winnipeg, and caused all sorts of problems for the Golden Knights in that conference final.
Well, one of the things with Nick and Cole. And Tyler certainly does too. I mean, he's a really good goal scorer. But Nick is such a strong, smart 2-way centerman. I mean, he doesn't have the size and the power of Mark Scheifele, but he's got the same processing speed as Mark in terms of his thinking and understanding how to extract the best out of other players and the players he plays with. I mean, when you think about that goal where he set up Eric Stahl, he goes down the left wing boards. He draws Alex Pietrangelo right into his web. Alex Pietrangelo, we're talking about a top defenseman that he just kind of pulls him in, and boom, it's wide open in the slot for Stahl. And Nick has always been a player, and having watched him for as long as I have, he's always had the brain power. He's never been a flash and dash player. But he was the MVP of the OHL playoffs. His team won the championship in Guelph. He's another player when you talk about moments and you talk about bigger games. And I saw Barry Trotz talking about Justin Williams. He said, good players don't become smaller in big games. And that's Nick Suzuki. And it's not like it's hard. Like there's pressures and the checking is tighter. The demands are greater. And Nick doesn't have that. But and then, I always said this about Jack Hughes and Cole Caulfield. People would say, wow, Cole's playing with Jack Hughes. The goal scorer needs the playmaker, and the playmaker needs a goal scorer. So Jack's brilliance in playmaking needed the finishing ability of Cole Caulfield, and Cole needed the playmaking of Jack, right? They went perfectly together, right? Like nobody ever said that, when you got a top end scorer, in Mike Bossy, and say, wow, you know what, like he had Brian Trottier. Yeah, we know he had Brian Trottier, but Brian Trottier had Mike Bossy, right? So, and so I think that they, it's the proverbial 1 + 1 = 3 with those two guys. But, again, Nick and Cole have never, ever, in all the years I've watched them play, have never, ever been shrinking violets in the championship games and the big games and the ones and that's what you really want you just want the players to play to their strengths. It's not about exceeding their abilities, but don't fall short. And, you've seen it for years. I've seen it for years where players, for one reason or another, sometimes in those biggest moments don't have their best games.
Craig, from one Cole to another, because we got to ask you about Cole Perfetti. I mean, I watched every game he played with the Manitoba Moose this season. He went from a guy who was in the perimeter, getting points on the power play, to suddenly attacking the net. Pascal Vincent described one of his goals, against Belleville as just a goal scorer's goal, a guy who's willing to go into the tough areas. That was a transition in his game that we saw from the start of his unexpectedly first pro season to the end. And then obviously ending it with the World Championship and getting a chance to be with Team Canada. From your perspective, from a development perspective, because he's not, with everything going back to normal, he won't be available for the AHL next year. If he isn't able to make the Jets roster, do you still see that good development path for Cole Perfetti in the OHL?
Dave, it's a great question. So, and the fact that you were able to watch him and watch that progression in the American Hockey League is so significant for a young player. You guys know what I think of Cole. I love him. I think he's fantastic. And the way you described him too, he's always played up an age group coming up. So, players, when you're younger, you're not as big, you're not as strong. Sometimes you recognize, why am I going to go there? I'm not going to have success. And yet sometimes we judge them and go, well, he's not going to the tough areas. It's not that they won't. Maybe they just know they can't. And I think with Cole, having watched this over the years, that once he figures it out and once he gets comfortable understanding how he gets his strengths, and he does. And I think you saw that, Dave, over the course of the year. Yeah. When I think about Cole and I think about what he's gone through. So the pause happens in March 2020, right? So he's having he's a fantastic player in the OHL, fantastic, right? Like one of the best. And then the pause. So then, it goes all the way down the stretch. He gets drafted, goes to the World Junior Camp. And, and as time went on at the World Junior, he got better there. He got better and better. And remember, he was a late cut on the previous year's gold medal team. Then he comes to the American Hockey League, right? And now you're playing pro hockey. You're playing against players that are physically more mature, mentally more mature, and they're going to challenge you in different ways. And you pointed it out. He got better and better. He kind of adjusted. Then he goes to the World Championships, right? Like even a level a little bit higher, and playing with really good NHL players and against some really good players. And so now you understand even better, where it's at. So he comes to training camp this September in Winnipeg, right? And I really think he's prepared, really, really prepared to challenge for a spot. Now, to answer your question, like Cole, if he has to go back to the OHL, I think he'll go back and I think he'll play well. I don't think it's good for his development. I'm not one to rush development. You guys know that. I'm one that always says you need more time, not less. But when I go through that whole step by step, what he went through the last year, that's a step back. That's a step back in terms of competition. And this is one of those scenarios where, I get where the OHL and the CHL says, okay, we want to play. If you're about development, you should let that player go.
Saturday morning
development, right? Like development means allowing a player to go and meet the next challenge. And I don't think that Cole going back to Saginaw or the OHL or anywhere, and somebody will say, oh yeah, he'll end up on a good team. He gets a chance to compete for a Memorial Cup. That's not development. That's team selfishness.
Saturday morning, you're live with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms. Our guest is TSN Director of Scouting, Craig Button, talking about the upcoming 2021 NHL Draft, less than a month away. Craig, from a Cole to another Cole to a Corson. Corson Sulemans is who, in your latest mock draft, you have the Jets projected to take at 17th overall. I guess sort of a two-part question for you. You know, from the scouting perspective, you know, Corson Sulemans is a guy who's played, by my count, 14 hockey games in the last year, maybe year and a bit, 8 in the Alberta Junior Hockey League, 6 with Team Canada at the under 18s. So how difficult is it to get really an accurate scouting report on a player like him and like so many others in this draft class? And then secondly, what is it about Corson Sulemans that you like that makes you think he goes 17th overall to the Winnipeg Jets?
Well, first of all, as you guys well know, my mock draft is exactly right. That's exactly what everybody's going to take. Right? I mean, I joke about it. I do joke about it because it's funny. Oh, they're not taking this guy. And I always say, the NHL teams don't know who they're taking right now. How do you think I'm going to know? And just so you know, I tell people, you don't know either. But I'm not trying to pretend I know. I'm just trying to say, hey, this is a player or players that fit. I think this would be a nice fit for this team within the range of potential, and I recognize that. So I'll get to the Corson question on that at 17 in a second. But you know, I've said this often, and I not only believe it to be true, I know it to be true. The Winnipeg Jets have as strong a scouting group and as strong a scouting process as anybody in the National Hockey League. They are that good. And excuse me. So, you know, you're going to tap into the 14 games as best as you can. You're going to try to, you know, you got to evaluate hard. Like knowing, oh my Lord. Like, think about Corson coming to the under 18, plays the first game, everybody's excited, and then he doesn't play the second game. People are going, oh boy, they know he's a good player. Now it's like, oh boy, that's one less game we get to evaluate him. Comes back so, you know, one of the things, just to share this with you guys, a number of scouts would say to me, did you see that young guy? I said, listen, you guys, stop watching underage players. You don't have time to watch underage players. Watch the players that you're going to have to make a decision on coming up, because like you know who the good young players are: Connor Bedard, Shane Wright. You don't need to spend any time watching them. So, you know, again, like all teams, and specifically the Winnipeg Jets, you go in and you're watching, you know, those areas of his game, or any player's game, that you're trying to project to the NHL. Skating is still skating. Puck skills are still puck skills. You know, thinking is still thinking. And so do you have as much game data to evaluate? No, you don't. But you can still evaluate those things. And for teams, you're going to go back in time. I mean, Corson has played in some pretty on some pretty good teams. He was on a national championship team with Brooks in the Alberta Junior Hockey League that won the Junior A championship. He came right out of midget hockey and was a top 4 defenseman on that team. So you're going to try to go back in time and then try to assess how much he's improved. With respect to Corson and why I put him in the Winnipeg Jets slot, I really think two things. Number one, Corson, I think, is a really good offensive defenseman. I think he's a defenseman that can get into the offensive zone and make plays and score goals. He can shoot the puck. He can be a real offensive threat. And then, you know, he's got all the attributes. And then I watch how the Winnipeg Jets develop defensemen, and I just think that, like, that type of skill set, those types of attributes, they've done a fantastic job of identifying them and then developing them. And, you know, that type of a player that adds that type of an element to your team, you know, so I look at it as a fit, and that's all it is. Does it mean he's the only fit? No, but that's why I had Corson in that spot.
You know, Craig, just, you know, going back to, you know, the mock draft, and we are going to hold you accountable to every single pick. We're going to have you back on July 25th to break down every pick. But, you know, obviously, you know, Owen Power, you know, represented Canada along with Cole Perfetti in Latvia. You know, he's number 1 on your list. And I wanted to ask you about, you know, the Sabres and whether you think that they could be looking at Matthew Beniers seriously because of the Jack Eichel effect, right? Like, and we don't know, when Eichel is going to be traded. I think, most people, can read the tea leaves, and it looks like, Eichel, could easily be traded by the Sabres. But do you think that factors in, or do you think that's kind of a ridiculous notion, and they're going to take the best player, that they think is available at number one, which obviously, very well could be Owen Power of the University of Michigan?
So a couple things there that I would say to you, Ezra, is that number one, I think you always have to consider different options, and options within a band of players, within a grouping of players. And if you're talking about Matt Beniers, I think you talk about what does this mean for our team, because while you're selecting based on one draft, you're also looking at your team, and if you're going to trade Jack Eichel, what else could you be potentially getting in return that we don't know, right? So, but the Buffalo Sabres do. So now they start to look and they start to say, well, we might be getting a good young defenseman back. And I'll just give you an example. So I got asked this question on radio a couple weeks ago. Would you trade, if you were Buffalo, would you trade Jack Eichel to the Anaheim Ducks for their third overall pick, Jamie Drysdale and Trevor Zegras? I said, yep. That was my answer. Yep. So the reason, and I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I don't want to spread rumors, and I'm not going to. But so now all of a sudden you get Jamie Drysdale, you get a Trevor Zegras, right? You get the third overall pick, right? So now you start to think, okay, what does this mean? I got 1 and 3, So I think that all has to go into your thinking about what builds out your team, right? And and then what are other teams potentially offering you if you really are going to take Matty Beniers, or you want to take Matty Beniers? What else will they offer you, for that first overall pick if somebody covets Owen Power? So I think it's prudent. I think it's smart. It doesn't really. I mean, we take the picks in isolation, but teams are looking at it, from like kind of a multi-dimensional view. Like you're looking at it from, okay, who's the best player? Who do we like and everything, but also for your team and like what fits, considering, as you point out, a pretty significant discussion going on about Jack Eichel's future in Buffalo. So, I think that is totally plausible. And quite frankly, I'd be surprised if the Buffalo Sabres aren't because it's not one team phoning the Buffalo Sabres on Jack Eichel. It's multiple teams phoning Jack Eichel.
TSN Director of Scouting Craig Button is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, we're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Craig, you talked about, scouting staffs being ready, and I've talked to some people who within the scouting world who say that they're prepared for this draft, but this is going to be probably a draft like no other. And do you think that it'll be very interesting, I think, retrospectively, like generally it always is, but more so this year than any other, because there could be so many opportunities, and we see so much damage done by, and in that, I mean that in a positive way, with scouting staffs when you're able to get like a Mason Appleton in the 6th round, a Connor Hellebuck in the 5th round. So do you see that opportunity here for teams to be able to draft gems that are going to turn into just dynamic players for teams in a few years that aren't necessarily viewed in that way right now?
Absolutely. And you know what, just because, you talk about Connor, or you talk about Mason, and, I'll go to we see players like a Braden Point. I just use Braden, he goes in the 3rd round based on, and that happens when you have a lot of opportunity to watch players, right? So, yeah. So I think when you use the word gem, I think we've seen it in previous drafts. And I think we're going to see it again this year. One of the things that I'm going to be really curious to watch. What are teams going to do? I think in a year where everybody's on the same playing field, level playing field, nobody's got an advantage over anybody else, even though they all think they do. And I'm talking about playing. They've all been able to watch the players, and they're going to mine information. If it was me, and this is my philosophy in this year's draft, swing for the fences. Swing for the fences in the 3rd round, the 2nd round, the 4th round, the 5th round, because that's where you're going to get gems. And if there's a player you think has a potential to be a really good offensive defenseman that might be only 5'10" right now, and maybe you haven't seen him as much, that's I think projection, and a confident projection. When I say confident, yeah, that's what we see him as. Go for it. That's where I think you can hit some real big home runs. And even if you don't, doubles are good too. Like Mason Appleton is a really good double. Right? But that's how I'd be approaching it. There'd be nothing everything for me would be about Who's got the greatest upside? Let's go.
And then, so that'll lead me to the next question then, Craig. Looking at those guys who might not necessarily be top of mind, those guys who might be home runs later in the second or the third rounds, the guys who might be the diamonds in the rough, who jumps out at you right now, and as you've been doing your prep work, as a guy that might be that kind of player?
Okay, so I think you just tricked me, Drew. Because when I say that, because now when I say you tricked me, and you're all smart guys. So really what you've done is you forced me to prepare to come back with my answer in the next week or so, right? That's what you've done. Right?
And that's perfect. We can rain check that answer.
Okay, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rain check it instead of just throwing out, because I can give some really, really good examples of that, right? But like I don't want to do it off the top of my head because I don't think that that's fair. But like, so you Ezra, you arrange that. Let me know when you want me back before the draft, and that'll be the rain check question. But again, like you look at a player like you guys watch him on Neal Pionk. Like I watched Neal play in the USHL, and you watch him. He always had the same initiative, but he wasn't big. He wasn't mature, like physically mature and everything. But how you watch him play today with the Jets, a really good NHL defenseman, that's how he played. But so when I say it's easy to look and say, okay, this is how big he is. Okay, this is where he's at. But when you talk about projection and you say, well, if that guy grows, if that guy gets physically stronger, this is what you think. That's what I mean about going for it. And like swing for the fences, right? And so if you draft Neal Pionk in the 7th round or the 6th round or the 5th round, depending on where you think you get him, that's the type of player that I'm talking about. Like that. And I'll have examples for you, promise you. We will, like at different positions and everything. But, that's the type of thinking that I would like to see, that I'm going to evaluate, but I want to see that employed. As my good friend Craig Ramsey said, safe as death.
We will rain check that answer, and we'll bring you back on before the draft in about, I guess the draft's a little less than a month from now. Yeah. Let you go on this last question then, Craig. The sample sizes for so many of these players this year are all over the place. Mm-hmm. The guys that played U.S. college obviously have more games that scouts were able to watch. Some of the other guys who played, be it overseas or, if they were playing Canadian junior hockey, much smaller sample sizes. If you're a first-round player, a projected first-round pick, maybe late first round, wherever it might be, this year in particular, are you better off having that small sample size for scouts to have watched and maybe have the unknowns, or the bigger sample size where scouts could maybe pick apart your game a little bit more?
Well, it's a great question, so I'm going to answer this in multiple ways. If you want to make excuses for not getting good players, you can fall back on the small sample size in the future. Wow, we didn't get a chance to see him that much. Right? The scouts go into games, and I'm kidding. I really am kidding about that. But, you want to try to – honestly, scouting is about picking apart players' games. It really is, because ultimately what you get a crack in each round. You might have extra picks here or there, but you're really getting one crack at a player to try to help your organization in the future. That's what you get at, right? And you want to gain as much confidence in the player you're going to select, or the group of players you're evaluating. So, picking the player apart, that's a necessary part of the job. It really is. So, and when you can have more opportunity to gain that confidence, I call it a confidence building exercise. You're going to have that opportunity. But I also know this very much about scouts and the scouting in the NHL. When you're going to watch a player, you have to go in to watch a player with the idea, we have to evaluate hard. We have to go in and watch this player hard, because what happens if we don't get a chance to see him again? What happens if he gets hurt? That's always been, something that's been. So the NHL scouts, like, it might be November, and you go in, I'm evaluating hard. So even though it's a small sample size, and I go back, like, that means, like, if you're watching a kid in his underage year in junior hockey or at the under 17 show, you got to go in and evaluate hard. You got to evaluate like that, because that's going to be data, and that's going to be information that's going to help build that confidence that I point out, right? So do I think that, is there greater uncertainty this year? Absolutely. Is it going to lead to a little bit less of that confidence that you would desire when you're selecting players? Absolutely it is. But I'd also believe that with the experiences that teams, and specifically, the Winnipeg Jets have with respect to their staff and their group and knowing each other and understanding what process that they go through and how to, maximize it. I think that they'll go into the draft and have a great opportunity to draft not only good players, but players that they're confident in, despite the fact that they didn't get as much viewings as they would have liked.
And Craig, hold on, because Drew put you on the spot, Craig. I work with Hockey Manitoba, so I'll give a shout out to Connor Roulette, who you're very familiar with, won a gold with Team Canada at the U18. So he's a guy that, and Carson Lambos as well is you had at 16. So I'll throw those two Winnipeggers out there before we have you on next. So because Drew put you on the spot, I'll bail you out with those two Manitoba products.
Carson's a really good player. And, I'll just finish with this about Carson. Carson, we talk about those top four defensemen. I'm not so sure that, for me, Carson might be just on the outside of it, and Corson as well, Carson and Corson. But I don't know, and this is part of the evaluation. I'm not so sure how far out of it they are. Those are two good players. The cars that'll be fun. Carson and Corson, Carson and Corson. But they're both good players. And we started off talking about Chandler Stevenson, and it's interesting. And when you bring up Connor Ezra, in my notes, I have a couple of times put Chandler Stevenson ? On Connor Roulette. That type of a player, maybe not a high-end offensive player, but a player that can play in a lot of different situations and play with good players and help them be better. So, there's my commentary back on Hockey Manitoba. So no problem.
Love it.
From Cole to Carson from Cole to Carson to Carson from Craig. I think we got that.
What about Carson Kuhlman on the Boston Bruins? Right? He must think, I have a clone out there.
Oh yeah, wouldn't that be something? Yeah.
Enough. Too many hard C's or K's or whatever it might be. Craig Button, TSN Director of Scouting. Craig, we'll do it again in a few weeks' time. I appreciate it. Always appreciate your time and your insight. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Always a pleasure to join you. Thank you guys for having me, and I look forward to joining again in a couple of weeks. Have a great Saturday.
Thanks, you too, Craig. There he goes. Craig Button, TSN's Director of Scouting, good friend of the program. Let's take our final commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Stanley Cup final. It gets underway on Monday. The Habs and the Lightning. We'll talk about that. Lots more to come. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
10 minutes before the top of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live here Saturday morning on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. Big thank you to Craig Button for joining us. Craig's always one of our favorites, and that was no question about that. After that entertaining and insightful interview, we'll be glad to get him back on before the draft in about less than a month's time. I want to take this opportunity to remind everybody a big July coming up here for the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Huge July. In addition to all of our regular Saturday shows,
colossal,
we're going to be bringing you live broadcasts related to the upcoming NHL expansion draft. So that'll be a special, if I'm not mistaken, that's a Wednesday night. So we'll do a live broadcast throughout the NHL expansion draft. We'll do a live broadcast on day one of the NHL draft, that of course being Friday night. We'll do our regular live broadcast for day two of
his birthday.
His birthday, so you can all get ready with your banners and your cakes and your celebratory party favors and whatnot.
Me and Mr. Leadership, Patrice Bergeron.
Yes, that's
and J-Lo.
And J-Lo, of course. Yes, I'm sure she's
and
staying
Anna
at home.
Paquin.
Anna Paquin, Winnipegger.
Yep.
Actually,
and,
Anna Paquin.
And Mr. Home Run himself, Barry Bonds.
Well, there you go. It's quite the celebrity birthday. If
Notice
anybody
that I didn't say Mr. Something else, by the way.
You could, like what? Like Mr. Steroids? You can say Mr. Steroids. It won't be a big deal. I can say it. If you're not going to say it, I'll be glad to say it. I'm pretty sure that ship has sailed, that I'm not going to get sued.
I was going to say Mr. Hall of Fame. I know I want to get Drew going on that.
No, I don't. I'm not going to get that. Doesn't rile me up. Don't worry about that. I'm not getting riled up about that.
In any event,
it's a big July expansion draft coverage Friday and Saturday, and then free agency coverage. We'll do the free agency opens at about 12 noon, I think, on a Wednesday. We'll do a special show that night. So that, 7, 8 o'clock, whatever time it's going to be, we'll do a special day one free agency recap show as well. So a big July ahead here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on our YouTube channel.
And then, Drew, in August, none of us are going to speak to each other.
There's no question about that. In August, we'll be taking our usual hiatus, but we'll be back for the start of training camp before you know it. It'll be here. It's amazing. The next season is going to be here right before you know it. There will be no time, no downtime at all. But we look forward to bringing you all that coverage. So mark that in your calendars to be sure to join us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on our YouTube channel. Smash the subscribe button, hit the like button if you haven't already done so on both of those counts. Let's talk about the Stanley Cup Final. It gets underway on Monday. The Montreal Canadiens, their epic run continues. They pull off the monumental upset of the Vegas Golden Knights, a disappointing end to a great season for the Golden Knights. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, they squeak by the smallest of margins, one shorthanded goal. They squeak by the New York Islanders, and it's going to be a Tampa-Montreal final. Can the Habs keep it going? Can they continue this Cinderella run? I mean, this is a team that, if I'm not mistaken, finished 18th overall in the NHL standings during the regular season. It doesn't matter at this point, but it is crazy to think about that. If they ever went to the top 16, the Montreal Canadiens were not going to have been there, and instead they're in the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 1993.
Yeah, I absolutely think they have a chance. And first off, before we get into the analysis of the Stanley Cup final, the start times are beautiful. 7 o'clock Central for every single game. It's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
No,
7 o'clock.
You're the one game. The Sunday game is at. There's a Sunday game that's at 6 o'clock.
Well, 6 of 7, Drew, are at 7 o'clock.
Look, accuracy counts.
Okay.
Accuracy
If
counts.
the series goes to 7 games, 1 game. So 6 of 7 are at 7 o'clock. I love that. Just wanted to get that in there. Considering that all year long we've had games at 9, we've had games at 6. So 7 o'clock is great with the kiddos. They're usually in bed by 8.
As he needs his beauty sleep, folks. You don't get that kind of youthful glow on your skin just by staying up late hours.
Exactly. Craig Button said this just half an hour ago. Since losing the 3 of 4 against Toronto, in the last 13 games, the Montreal Canadiens are 11-2. This is not a fluke. This is a really good team. Now, is Tampa Bay the favorite? Yes, they're the favorite because they are the better team on paper and they're defending Stanley Cup champions, right, guys? But I'm going with the Montreal Canadiens for the simple fact that in the first round, I picked Toronto. In the second round, I picked Winnipeg. In the third round, I picked Vegas. So obviously, I'm going to go with Montreal.
Shouldn't you pick
Montreal?
Yeah, shouldn't you pick the Lightning? Shouldn't you pick the Lightning so Montreal wins?
I will go back to January though, when I picked the Montreal Canadiens to go to the Stanley Cup Finals because, God help us, Dave kept reminding us that he took Dallas last year. So I'm going to shove this in your face, Dave. I picked the Montreal. I also picked Rod Brind'Amour to win the Jack Adams. I noticed you guys were pretty silent on Twitter when I was gloating about that one, but
I blocked you a long time ago. I don't see your tweets.
That's okay, Drew. But look at, I
know it's okay.
Team,
I did it.
Yeah, but the only thing is, I also picked Vegas to go to the Stanley Cup Final, but they played in the conference final, so I forgot that Vegas and Montreal would have to face each other in the conference final. So
they didn't have to.
They didn't have to. It had to go to.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the rankings.
Well, I picked Vegas. I picked Vegas to win the cup against Montreal. So it's kind of funny that Vegas was knocked out by Montreal in the final. But regardless, let's get back to the series here.
Well, no, hang on. If you're done throwing out your rotator cuff, clapping yourself on the back for all your accomplishments, can you maybe now start analyzing the series?
I will. Okay, so Craig mentioned this. I agree with him 100%. Nikita Kucherov's health is going to be important. But I think ultimately, there's so many good storylines and there's going to be so many fascinating matchups. Andre Vasilevsky versus Carey Price, guys, this is just my opinion. It's a wash. Who can you give one team an advantage here in net? I don't think you can. I would probably give Montreal the edge, but Vasilevsky most likely is going to win the Vezina Trophy this year. So I don't think there's any edge in goal. I think where you do have the edge is on defense. Look at Victor Hedman, right? The analytics weren't as good for Hedman. He's been pretty good through 3 rounds for the Lightning, right? We saw Ryan McDonough and how well he played last year. I like how David Kivas, like my Barry Horowitz mentioned. But, I do think that...
when Barry Horowitz mentioned.
No, I mentioned it.
Well, I was with the clapping on the back.
Well, yeah, but then I said it. Okay, we'll share that one, Drew.
Thank you. We'll share that.
A washed-up wrestler from the 1990s who happened to be a good Jewish boy. But I do think you're going to give the edge to Tampa Bay when it comes to depth at forward. Dave, I look at that third line, right? And Yanni Gourde obviously scored the only goal in the 1-0 win, the shorthanded goal against the Islanders. But I look at that third line and I look at Blake Coleman and I look at Barclay Goodrow, and what stands out to me. And Joe Smith wrote about this in The Athletic. If you haven't read the article, he talks about what stands out to me. Barclay Goodrow was 1-on-4 against the Islanders yesterday. He killed about 30 seconds, if you remember, with about a minute and a half left in the game. I mean, this is a guy who was undrafted, who obviously, the Lightning had to give up the first-round pick. It's just depth. You have Tyler Johnson, who they tried to obviously get rid of. He's on your fourth line. This is a guy who a couple of years ago had 29 goals, right? He's your fourth line center. So, Patrick Maroon and Ross Colton are the other guys on that fourth line. There's just so much depth, right? Mikhail Sergachev and David Savard, that's your third pairing, right? It's just, you go up and down the lineup, Jan Ruda, obviously, he's coughed up the puck a little bit, but I just look up and down that Lightning roster and there's just so much depth. Do the Canadians have a lot of depth? Yes, of course they do. Arturi Lekkinen, even though he missed the earlier part of the playoffs, this is a guy who, just seems to always step up and provide goals. But you've got, Eric Stahl, Corey Perry, and Joel Armia on that fourth line. So the Canadians have depth too. I think this is going to be a long series. I'm going to go with the Canadians, but obviously the Lightning have the edge when it comes to game breakers with, Braden Point, Steven Stamkos, Alex Killorn, players like that. So yeah, the Lightning are going to be, the Habs' toughest test. But on the other hand, on the flip side, Dave, the Habs are going to be the Lightning's, toughest test that they've seen so far.
So as a Team X is going to win the series in.
I just did. I said I'm picking the Canadians. I'll go Canadians in 7.
Okay, there you go. He's on the record, and he's been successful a lot this year.
Well, obviously, the Lightning are going to win in 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sweep. In fact, they win in 3. Yeah. Dave?
Well, I mean, as he's just gone through it, so I'm not going to just reiterate the points that he's made. I think that Montreal seems to be on some sort of just magic run. To the point you've made, they've had an advantage where their opponents have lost critical pieces. Kucherov could be a critical piece. Tampa's so deep that they've been able to win without Kucherov in the lineup, obviously. But that is he's such a big driver for that Tampa team. So you don't just minimize a loss like his, but again, it's offset by how deep they are. Mark Dumont, our good friend, who's a special correspondent for the Habs, who we have regularly on when we're talking about the Montreal Canadiens. He doesn't want anybody picking Montreal because he feels that the Montreal Canadiens benefited best from having that underdog status. It's funny. It's one of those things. Like, it's hard to believe that it's been since 1993 that a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. So you go back and it's always ironic, right? Because you look at a team like St. Louis when they won. I think they had more Canadians on that team than any team's ever had. So it's not as if there's not Canadian players who are winning it and bringing it back to Canada, obviously. But an actual Canadian team, it's Canadian City gets to cheer. Although, I mean, the cheering that was going on after that win over Vegas was something else. I was trying to think, that was a different element, obviously, of things that were happening. But Drew, it's funny because you had tweeted it before about how big on St. Jean Baptiste Day, if Montreal could actually win, what that sort of reaction would be in La Belle Provence. So that was,
and the answer was one Copp car being flipped.
I'm surprised there wasn't more damage. I mean, to be perfectly looking at that crowd that was gathered outside the arena and everything that was going on.
They wouldn't let people out of the arena.
I know. They didn't let people out of the arena saying, sorry, it's too dangerous.
And Jeff Molson had to come on the PA and be like, well, we're going to entertain you a little bit longer. But I mean, by the way, how awful is that for Vegas? You want to just get on the plane and get the hell home, and you're stuck in the arena because of all those fans. So you got to, Dennis said it, you remove your media hat and you look as just as a fan, and you think to yourself, it would be something for the Montreal Canadiens, the last Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup, to bring it back to Canada, and it would be something significant. I mean, but it's going to take something significant. The magic is going to have to keep going. Carey Price, I think Dennis said it, and he's right. And we talked about it when we had Mark Dumont on. How significant was that injury that allowed, or not, I mean, obviously not in a good way, but that concussion that he was dealing with towards the end of the season. Jake Allen plays 17 of the last 21 games for Montreal. Carey Price is so rested, and look at what we're seeing. Look at the value of rest. I mean, he's a veteran goaltender, but look at the value of rest. So Carey Price is at another level. If Carey Price keeps going like this, then yeah, I mean, I give the edge to Tampa as the favorite, but I definitely see Montreal as having an ability to win this series. I don't want to pick them because I'm just joking. I don't believe in that sort of stuff anyways. So I'm going to go Montreal in 7.
Well, there you guys go. Both of you on Montreal in 7. I appreciate it. You know me. I'm the person who always pours cold water on everything. I just don't see. Yeah, I mean, I think Tampa Bay is just too good. I think it's going to go 7. I think Montreal's magic goes throughout the series, but I don't think that they're going to be able to keep it going. I think Tampa wins on home ice in Game 7, but I think it's going to be a fantastic playoff series, and I'm looking forward to watching a lot of it as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Drew. And it is going to be a little bit weird, but maybe not as weird considering when the Stanley Cup was awarded last year. But the fact that the Stanley Cup's going to be awarded on like July 5th or July 7th or whatever it's going to be is going to be a little bit weird. But the thing is, Drew, if Tampa Bay wins the Cup, the great thing is that they were salary cap compliant. They did nothing wrong. They were really the poster boys for just.
Now you're getting me fired up.
Don't get Drew fired up at the end of the show.
Don't get me fired up at the end of the show.
They weren't 1 cent over the salary cap.
I do want to address one thing before we go today. What's coming out of Chicago with the Blackhawks organization is one of the worst things I've heard related to the game of hockey in a long, long time. And I'm not going to stand here and I'm not going to point fingers at who knows what, because I don't know. But if it's found out that people know what it's being claimed that they know, they should forfeit the right to ever be involved in the sport of hockey ever again. Period. And I'm not a cancel culture guy. I'm not anything like that. But if you know of sexual assaults and sexual improprieties happening under your watch, happening where you can prevent it from happening, it has to stop. And if that means a whole lot of good hockey men, and definitely in quotes with that, because there's nothing good about covering up sexual assault allegations. If it means that you have to tear down an entire organization and multiple organizations, if it ends up, if it ends up spider webbing out throughout the game of hockey, that's what you do, because you have to remove the rot, and the rot is in multiple places. It's with the human being, and I use that word lightly, who does the act in the first place, and then it's even worse with the people who cover up for that human being and allow that person to then go and coach high school hockey and youth hockey, to put vulnerable kids in the eye close to a predator because you don't want to ruffle some feathers, because you don't want to disavow the wall of silence that has been around hockey for way too long. You lose the right to be involved in hockey at that point in time. And I wanted to say that before we end today's show, just to get it there. We don't know where it's going to go. Time will tell. When it's relevant for us to cover it, we will. But I had to get that on the record before we wrap up. And I'm sorry that we have to wrap up a really fun show today with such a negative topic, but I do think it is going to be hanging over this upcoming Stanley Cup final. And
I have no problem with it. I think you're right. I think it's completely unacceptable. There's just no place for that in hockey, period. And I think I don't have to add anything else to what you said. And maybe we might not be ending on the most positive note, but I think it did need to be said. So good for you for saying it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Want to say a big thank you to our sponsors before we end for today. Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Bernstein's Deli, Zappia Group Realty, Boston Pizza, and our friends, of course, at Seagram's. I might go take a shot of Fireball right now. It is the weekend after all, and the patios have now opened as it's 7 minutes past 11 o'clock. Go out, support local businesses. They've reopened finally, a lot of them. Do what you can if you can afford it and you can buy local and shop local and eat local and drink local. Go ahead and do it. It's going to be a beautiful day in Winnipeg. We've worked long and hard to get some of these restrictions lifted off. I hope you go and celebrate and enjoy it and do it responsibly and everything else along those lines.
I'll be at your backyard in about 15 minutes, Drew. It's going to take me that long to drive there. So, have a couple drinks ready for me. Have some snacks, some Hawkins cheesies. Let's go.
As always, the security guards are alerted that you're not allowed on my property, Ezzy. Dave, you're welcome anytime. But wanted to get that out there on the record, of course. Want to say a big thank you to Dennis Beyak and Craig Button for joining us on the program earlier today. They were great fun. Always great to talk to both of those guys. In case you missed any of the show, it's available immediately afterwards right back on our YouTube channel. If you want the podcast version, that'll be up on the website and in your local podcast player very shortly this morning or early this afternoon. Big thanks to everybody for joining us in the chat room. It was great to see so many of you, so many regulars, so many new folks. We always appreciate it. If you haven't done it yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash the like button on your way out. Always appreciate you guys doing that. For Dave Manouk in the top right, for Ezra Ginsburg in the bottom middle, I am your host, Drew Mindell. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.